No, no, oh, no, no, no. Huh?
You know the voice, you know the vacant stare, and for decades we've accepted this lovable, slow-witted buzzard as a masterstroke of pure, unadulterated Looney Tunes imagination. And yet...
In other words, just a figment of your imagination.
No!
When audiences sat in theatres in 1942, they were actually looking at a caricature, because they weren't just laughing at the bird, they were laughing at something else. There's a persistent illusion when we talk about Golden Age animation. We like to think of termite terrorist animators as isolated geniuses, conjuring characters entirely out of thin air, but the reality requires a more nuanced historical confirmation. Warner Brothers cartoons were not a closed ecosystem, they were a vibrant, reactive cultural mirror, and the biggest cultural force of the 1930s and 40s wasn't film. It was actually radio. Directors like Bob Clampett were incredibly plugged into the pop culture of their time. They were young, they were irreverent, and they understood that the fastest way to connect with an audience was through cultural shorthand. Why spend 5 minutes establishing a new character's personality when you could just borrow an archetype that 40 million Americans listened to in their living rooms the night before? Which brings us to a pivotal moment in the Warner Brothers canon, the 1942 short Bugs Bunny Gets the Boid, directed by Bob Clampett. This short introduces a young, bashful, aggressively unpredatory buzzard tasked by his mother to catch a rabbit. We know him today as Beaky Buzzard, but if you look at the original studio documents and model sheets from Clampett's unit, he wasn't called Beaky. The animators literally labelled him the Snerd bird. To understand why, we have to look at one of the most bizarre and brilliant phenomenons in American broadcast history. In the late 1930s and throughout the 1940s, one of the biggest and most highly rated stars on radio, an exclusively audio medium by the way, was, believe it or not, a ventriloquist. His name was Edgar Bergen. Now, doing ventriloquism on the radio sounds like a punchline, but Bergen was a masterful comedic writer and a brilliant character actor. He didn't just throw his voice, he created distinct, fully realized personalities. His main dummy was Charlie McCarthy, a sharp-dressed, fast-talking, cynical man about town. The show was the Chase and Sanborn Hour, sponsored by a coffee company, and it was one of the highest rated programs on American radio. We're talking about an era where radio wasn't just entertainment, it was the centerpiece of the living room. Families gathered around the set the way we gathered around screens now, and the Chase and Sanborn Hour was variety programming at its peak. Comedy sketches, musical guests, big-name Hollywood stars dropping by to trade banter with a wooden dummy who treated them worse than any human host would dare. And here's the thing that's genuinely hard to get your head around today. None of these people could actually see what Bergen was doing. There was no visual component. The audience at home was laughing at a ventriloquist act that they couldn't see, reacting to facial expressions and physical comedy that existed only in their imagination.
Charlie.
You frightened me, Bergen. You frightened me. I didn't know you were there.
You did?
No. Don't ever sneak up on me like that.
I'm sorry.
Just don't ever do it.
No. Well, I didn't know you were so high-strung.
Oh, I am? Yes, yes.
Bergen wasn't performing for a camera. He was performing for the microphone, and the microphone was enough. And if any of this does sound faintly familiar, there is a reason. Bergen and his dummies crossed over into film, and if you've seen Disney's Fun and Fancy Free from 1947, you've actually seen him. He hosts the live-action wraparound segments, performing with both Charlie McCarthy and Mortimer Snerd. For a lot of modern audiences, that movie is the only place they've encountered Bergen without ever knowing he was, in his day, bigger than most movie stars. But Bergen needed a foil for Charlie. He needed someone slow, philosophical, and impervious to insults because he simply didn't understand them. Enter Mortimer Snerd. Mortimer was the ultimate country hayseed. He had a prominent overbite, droopy eyes that looked permanently half asleep, and a meandering, droopy drawl that always seemed 3 steps behind the conversation.
Oh, Mortimer, don't you have any romance in your soul?
Not very much, no. Mortimer, how can you be so stupid? Well, it's clean living that did it. Oh.
He was a massive hit. The American public adored him. Bob Clampett noticed this and realized it was the perfect identity shift for a cartoon predator. Bugs Bunny is essentially a trickster. To make Bugs' trickery funny in Bugs Bunny Catches the Boid, the antagonist couldn't be a genuine threat. He had to be someone the audiences instantly recognized as a slow-witted pushover. Clampett and his animators didn't just borrow the voice. They mapped the rigid, awkward physical tics of a wooden puppet onto the rubbery, animated body of a buzzard. Look at how Beaky moves. His neck stretches and snaps back. His eyes blink out of sync, his jaw hangs slack. It is the exact posture of a dummy resting on a ventriloquist's knee. Of course, visual caricature only gets you halfway there. To sell the Snerd bird, Warner Brothers needed the voice. Enter Kent Rogers. Rogers was an insanely talented young impressionist. He was in his late teens when he joined the studio, and he was the guy you called when you needed a spot-on parody of a radio or Hollywood star. He provided the voice of Beaky Buzzard.
My mama done told me, bring home something for dinner.
Delivering a flawless Mortimer Snerd impression that gave the character his soul. Rogers reprised the role in Clampett's 1945 follow-up, The Bashful Buzzard. This short continued what had been established in Bugs Bunny Gets the Boid, but this time round, Beaky was the star.
Oh, pardon me, madam, I didn't mean to.
His mother also returns, voiced wonderfully by Sarah Berner, a legendary radio actress herself. But the history of Beaky Buzzard hit a tragic abrupt wall. Kent Rogers, the voice of Beaky, who was also the original voice of Henry Hawk and Junior Bear, enlisted in the military during World War II. In 1944, he was killed in a Navy training flight crash, and he was just 20 years old. It was a devastating loss for the studio. Suddenly, this character that Clampett had successfully spun out of radio gold was left without a voice. And for a studio that relied so heavily on specific vocal performances, it stalled the character completely. Beaky actually remained popular, but it took years for the studio to figure out what to do with Beaky. By the time Beaky reappeared on screen, the cultural landscape was changing. He was actually brought back twice by two different directors in 1950. Frisch Freleng utilised him in The Lion's Busy, and Robert Bob McKimson used him in Strife with Father. And this time around, Mel Blanc took over the vocal duties.
Go. Nope, I'd rather not, can't do it.
But this is where the historical record gets fascinating. Beaky Buzzard only appeared in 4 Golden Age theatrical shorts. 4. Yet if you look at the merchandising of the era, specifically the Dell and Gold Key Looney Tunes comic books, Beaky is everywhere. He was paraded around as a top-tier star, headlining his stories for years. And by the way, this was why he was brought back for those 2 extra shorts, and it was because he was so popular elsewhere. But he had actually outgrown his own cinematic footprint, but more importantly, he was outgrowing his own source material. This is the ultimate legacy of the so-called Snerd bird, and why tracing these radio origins is so vital. When Bob Clampett and his crew lifted Mortimer Snerd in 1942, they were executing a brilliant topical gag. They were speaking to an audience that was in on the joke, but time is ruthless to topicality. Edgar Bergen passed away in 1978. The golden age of radio faded into static, replaced by television and now internet and streaming. The millions of people who gathered around their radios to hear Mortimer Snerd are largely gone. But Beaky Buzzard's still here. When you watch these cartoons today, you aren't missing the joke. The joke has just transformed. The caricature outlived the subject. Warner Brothers didn't just borrow from 1940s radio, they accidentally preserved it. They took a wooden dummy, gave him feathers, and made him immortal. So the next time you hear that slow, bashful, remember the ventriloquist dummy who gave him his voice. So thanks a lot for watching this quickie video, guys, and let me know in the comments which cartoon character's secret origin should I uncover next. So until next time, guys, take care.
I'm bringing home a baby.